Are you wondering about what watercolor art supplies that you will need to buy so you can start in watercolor painting? In this video, I will share with you art supplies that you could buy as a beginner in watercolor painting. Hi, I am Bianca. I am a watercolor artist. I create watercolor tutorials and art supplies reviews. Stay with me until the end because I will share a lot of good art tips and supplies so you can start with watercolor painting. First, paper. I understand that watercolor paper is very expensive, so you will need to be wise in choosing the correct watercolor paper. There are two types of watercolor paper. First would be cold press and second is hot press. The difference would be cold press has texture and hot press is smooth. Cold press is good for painting everything, almost everything. But for hot press, that will be for realistic paintings. I use hot press now, but I started with cold press. I also recommend getting 100% cotton and 300 GSM. I recommend Baohong Academy, that is a student grade, but it's 100% cotton and 300 GSM. 300 GSM is the weight that you can get because that can hold a good amount of water. I recommend getting 100% cotton watercolor paper because it is easy to work with it. It will be easy for you to paint. It doesn't dry too fast. It absorbs a good amount of water and your colors mixes and blends nicely. I recommend Baohong Academy, that is a student grade, but if you have a budget, you could get Baohong Artist grade or Arch watercolor paper. You have the option to buy loose sheet or watercolor block. If you are going to use a loose sheet, you will need an artboard like this so you can tape down your watercolor paper. If you are going to use block, then it is also good. However, it's a bit expensive because you won't have a hard time in stretching your paper, taping it down to your artboard, and that can help you avoiding buckling your paper. I also recommend getting a sketchbook for beginners because in sketchbooks, you can record your progress and so you can see how you do well in different watercolor tutorials that you can watch, and you can also practice your brush strokes and also swatch your paints. Number 2, watercolor paints. As for a beginner, I suggest to buy student grade watercolor paints like Winsor Newton Cotman in 10 colors. You don't need to buy 24 colors, 40 colors, or a lot of colors. You just need 10 or 6 colors, and the very limited palette would be 3 colors of primary colors: red, blue, and yellow. Again, you don't need a lot of colors. Winsor and Newton Cotman is a student grade with primary colors, secondary colors, and neutral colors, and that is a good start for beginners too. If you would like an artist grade watercolors, I suggest to get Daniel Smith Essential Watercolor Set because it has 2 sets of primaries, red, blue, and yellow, that are also in cool and warm colors. With Daniel Smith Essential Watercolor Set, you can actually mix a lot. You can use it for painting flowers, landscapes, portraits, and a lot more. All you need to do is to study color mixing. I also recommend buying watercolor in tubes than in pan sets. In pan sets, that's actually 2 ml in a pan. Watercolor tubes have 5 ml on each tube. So if you ran out, you could just refill and transfer it in a small pans like this. Number 3, brushes. For brushes, you don't need a lot of brushes. For a starter, you can just get round brushes in 3 sizes: small, medium, and large. For small brushes, that will be size number 2. For medium, that will be size 4 or 6. For large, that could be size 8, 10, or 12. That depends on you. Right now, I am using 2 brushes. One is size 7 and one is size 4 fine tip. It will be also helpful if you can get a fine tip brush, like a brush. This is like size 4, but it has a pointed tip, so I can reach small areas in my painting, so I don't use a small brush anymore. I could just use the tip of this brush to paint thin lines instead of switching to a smaller brush. Number 4, mixing palette. If you bought the pan set and it has watercolor wells on it, well, you don't need to get a mixing palette. That's already good enough for you to mix your colors. But if you have watercolor tubes that has been transferred to pans, like what I did, well, you can get a ceramic mixing palette. I suggest ceramic because it is easier to mix colors with it than using a plastic or tin. Next would be jars. You don't need to buy specifically art jars or water jars for your watercolor painting. You can recycle whatever you have at home. This jar that I use is a recycled from chocolate spread that we bought years ago. So I just use this for my watercolor painting. Next would be towel. Well, I do not use paper towels that much because if you keep on using them while you're painting just to remove excess water from your brush, then it is getting expensive. What I use is just a towel that I got from my kitchen. Like this. I just use paper towel whenever I need to remove or lift colors from my watercolor painting. But just to remove colors from your brush, you can choose a towel. Next would be artboard. If you are using loose sheets, then you will need an artboard to tape down your paper. You don't need to buy actually. You can recycle. Just to show you this artboard that I am using, this is actually from an old cabinet that we are no longer use. As long as it's wood and painted, it's good. If you don't have anything at home, well, that is the time that you can buy an artboard. And here are the tips that I can share with you before you buy watercolor art supplies. First would be join Facebook groups. In Facebook groups, you could see a lot of beginner artists, hobbyists, and also supportive mentors. There, you can also see discussions about watercolors, art supplies, and their experiences in using them. Second, you don't need to buy a lot of paints and brushes. I know sale is coming, like Black Friday, Thanksgiving sale, Christmas sale. There are a lot of sale coming on every month actually, but you don't need to hoard or buy a lot of paints. Before I buy an artist grade watercolor paints in 2020, I think, well, I'm using Mungyo watercolor set and that has 48 colors and I hate it. I hate the fact that it has 48 colors, but then I do not use a lot of them. It also has 9 greens that's also overwhelming. I also made a review about watercolor sets, so if you are thinking in buying that, you can just buy the 12 colors. Don't buy the 48 colors because that's too much. If you are deciding to buy watercolor paints, that is the time when you are already accepting commission projects, or if you are planning to sell your work, or if you are planning to join exhibits. But if it's for just practicing or just a hobby, you don't need really an artist grade watercolor paints. Do not buy multiple colors in different brands. That's insane. Just to share with you my watercolor palette, I have Core, I have Daniel Smith, I have Winsor Newton, but I don't have the same color on different brands. I don't. I just buy limited colors of some brands, like for example, the Daniel Smith Essential set. That's it. I also have some paints from Core that is for high chroma set, and some selected watercolor paints from Winsor Newton Professional. So basically, I don't buy the same colors from different brands. I don't buy many colors. I just use this. I just added some colors to add into my palette one by one. For example, the Daniel Smith Iridescent Antique Gold. Also in this palette, I got also 3 colors from Core that they sent me as a sample, and I added here. I do not buy a lot of watercolor palettes, because first, you won't use them, and then it will be a waste of money if you won't use them and just put it into the drawer, okay? Because watercolor paints will last long. A little amount will go a long way. Lastly, watch art supply reviews. There are tons of art supply reviews on YouTube that you can watch, so you can see different experiences of artists before buying art supplies. You can also watch my playlist of art supplies so you can see how I use them and my experiences in using them. So I'll see you next time, and thank you for watching.